Good day, my name is Christelle from France de Klerk, Independent Technical Analyst. Colin wanted us to look at IBRX, Immunity Bio listed on the NASDAQ exchange. Colin, these are weekly graphs, and this line graph that represents only the closing price and not the high, the low, or the open, shows us that the share is fighting that red line, which represents the 40-week moving average. We know above the 40-week moving average, the long-term sentiment towards the share changes to positive, and that level is waiting at $15.88. Next strong support, a resistance that needs to change into a support, is waiting there at $18.74. Because then hopefully the next higher low will be confirmed. But below this strong support waiting at $15.13, the share will warn again. I also see a small distorted left shoulder, massive head, and a possible right shoulder. And at the moment, the neckline is waiting there around $16.82, which means this possible head and shoulder formation is in play. Only when the share starts to consolidate above the highest of the left or the right shoulder, which is waiting at $18.74, only above that level will the warning of my head and shoulder be off the table. Also take note, my stochastic indicator, which highlights overbought or oversold levels, is oversold at the moment, which means the probability is there that the instrument might bounce to higher levels. Very important, there needs to be as well a positive divergence. And by that, we mean that the blue line, the K line, the shorter moving average of the two needs to start to break upwards through that orange line that represents the D line, the longer moving average. So 1874 is your strong next level of resistance that needs to change into a support column, and that support of 1513 has to remain a support. Rian wanted us to look at Harmony, and I want to, and on our exchange, and with the spike in the gold price, a lot of investors and viewers wanted to know where they can get in. And we know with gold, if you're not in already, it's almost too late. But we said time and time again, a lot. In fact, all of the gold shares on our JSE has got head and shoulders formations on them. But a head and shoulder formation becomes obsolete when either the right or the left shoulder starts to change into a support and the share starts to consolidate above it. So at the moment, my red line, which represents my 40-week moving average, has changed into a support. And that is seen as very positive, Rian. Why? Because previously, if we look back on the Harmony graph, back on the 4th of Jan 21, which is our wedding anniversary, the share tested at the 40-week moving average and it retraced from that. And that means that it was a technical goodbye kiss. And the share warned that, hey, I want to go to lower levels first before I start to change this 40-week moving average into a support. But remember, we're sitting on a Thursday, and this graph is not finished yet with this candle because these are weekly graphs. So should Harmony confirm the optimism around that 40-week moving average, Harmony needs to close above that 40-week moving average at 74 Rand 93. And we know even on the gold price, that gold price is above the 40-week moving average. So if it can remain above it, that will be even better. On a daily graph, there is a window at Harmony. Maybe I must just show you, Rian, to go back. There's a window at Harmony there between the date of the 17th of September 2020 and the 16th of September. There's a window there on Harmony that closes at 100 Rand 66. And maybe just to correct myself, the wedding anniversary is not between me and Rian, it's between me and my real husband. Anyway, Rises wanted us to look at Hulamin. Ticker HLE on our exchange, if I'm not mistaken, no, HLM on our exchange. One of the market's favorites recently. A lot more volume was visible on Hulamin, but a beautiful arises, a beautiful possible inverse head and shoulder formation. And I want to draw that for you. Left shoulder, massive head, and a possible right shoulder. And I say possible because an inverse head and shoulder formation or a head and shoulder formation only gets confirmed when the neckline starts to change. In the case of an inverse, into a support. In other words, the share needs to start to consolidate above that neckline in order to confirm the optimism around that formation and say, hey, this formation is now in play. And that neckline on Hulamin is waiting there around R2.79. Again, should the right shoulder or the left shoulder waiting there at R1.85 starts to change into a resistance again. In other words, the share starts to consolidate below it, the possible optimism of this inverse head and shoulder will be off the table. My 40-week moving average has changed into a support. That is fantastic because if I look back at the history at Hulamin, time and time again, the share tried to change this moving average into a support. It could not do that. But here in November last year, it started to change it into a support and just rallied from strength to strength. My stochastic is not looking great. I mean, it is approaching oversold levels. Both my lines are still pointing downwards. But last week's dragonfly candle with the long tail at the bottom arises is a good indication. It tells me that the share went as low as R2.02, but they've managed to push the share all the way back to close at R2.33. And that tells us there were more buyers than sellers in that session. Again, this candle is not finished yet. So last week's support of R2.02 needs to remain in place. Below that, it will be our first warning. Then obviously the 40-week moving average waiting at R1.81 will be a critical level that has to remain a support to confirm this possible inverse head and shoulder formation on Hulamin. Lucky wanted us to look at the cryptocurrency pair BCHUSD. And we know, I mean, with the cryptos, a lot of volatility, a lot of news around them. And at the moment, Lucky, we can see it pulled all the way back close to that red line, the 40-week moving average. That weighted at around 500. It tested it, bounced all the way back to 770. And that is seen as very positive. That long tail at the bottom of the candle tells us again that even if the share went as low, it pushed all the way back to go back to 770 instead of continuing to hover there at 479 is the level of the 40-week moving average. Sometimes the 40-week moving average is too slow an indicator or too slow a moving average to use for especially short-term traders. So what you can do is maybe use the 20-week and rather use, if you're assuming you're using weekly graphs, and rather use that as a stronger protection level. Because even if you go back to this pair, you'll see there that every time it reached the 20-week moving average, it tested it, 442 bounced dollars. Again, 268 bounced. So it's a much more stronger moving average to use, Lucky, than the 40-week moving average. And remember, with every moving average on every graph, play around with them. You know, graphs are like people. Not everything works on that particular graph. And sometimes you need to stick to the main rules, but play around and see maybe the 100-day works a lot better on this daily graph than the 200-day. Because the most important part of technical analysis is identifying strong support and resistance levels to see where were the buyers stronger or where were the seller the stronger parties. Obviously, the next strong resistance, Lucky, on this pair is waiting at 970. Above that, we can assume that this instrument can rise to higher levels. Tinus wanted us to look at Kumba and consider a short on Kumba, he said. So again, I mean, with the iron ore price where it is, it's difficult dangerous, let me rather say, to start shorting these metals at these record high levels. But Tinus, you're a good technical analyst and you have identified, I'm sure, a possible double top formation. Now we know double tops, head and shoulders, triple top formations, those are all formations that appear at the top of a rally that highlights and warns that, hey, maybe this rally is coming to an end and one should consider taking profit. So this possible double top will only be confirmed when that neckline, and you can either use this support or you can maybe use the real body support and the shadow, and that looks like a stronger level for me. and that is waiting at 573 Rand and 11 cents. So below that level, this double top formation will be in play. Obviously, my 40-week moving average is a strong support. And once that changes into resistance and that waits at 590 Rand 68, the warning on the table will be for long-term investors. And then, Tinus, you know, what is the level or the target of my double top? It's the length of the left or the right leg, and some might call it, Crystal, a distorted double top because this right part of my leg is a little bit higher than the left part. You can take the conservative target of the left leg, and that means Kumba can go back to 448.53 should the full formation play out. And remember, if I go back, before I reach 448.53, these levels here at 470 Rand 47 is a lot stronger. So once the share starts to reach these strong support levels, the same level it started to support the share back in October and November last year, have a look and see what the share does. Have a look at the candles and see if the buyers are not starting to protect the share. Again, Tina's above that high of 725 Rand 96. Above that level, we can assume that the momentum to the top can continue and that the share can reach for record high. If we go back to the history of Kumba, we can see that it's clearly again in record-breaking territories. The last time the share traded around 615 Rand was back in February 2013. So always a good place to take profits if you are in profit territory, or maybe if you're a brave trader, you can consider a short and use those levels. And remember, Tinas, the highs and the lows of candles is also strong support and resistance levels. So if it's hard to find a trend line with a couple of touching points, use the lows and the highs of the candles to identify or use it as protection levels.